Welcome to White Pill Radio, the roughly every other episode version of Theology on Air, which is a podcast produced by Theology by the Pint, which is a ministry where we get together once a month. We have craft beer and food. Got to pay $5 extra for the food, but we have craft beer and food, and we talk about theological, moral, even political issues as we did this week. To learn more about Theology by the Pint, go to, you'll never guess the website, theologybythepint.org. theologybythepint.org. You'll learn about upcoming events, past events, probably some YouTube links there. You can figure out where to find the podcast, but if you're listening to this, you probably already know that. But White Pill Radio kind of covers a lot of the really zeitgeisty type stuff, news headlines from a Christian point of view. I have to read this because I have to get it right, but we are post-apologetic, ultimately hopeful, applied theology that looks at news and current events from a Christian worldview. Yes, I should have that memorized. Shame on me. Shame, shame. I like to say that this is blessed talk, not happy talk.
Not happy talk.
So, we got a lot of stuff to cover, and we're getting better at covering more articles in a timely manner. So we're going to try to cover the gamut. You might know that there is a presidential election going on, so some interesting crossover stories that have come up there. But theologybythepint.org, if I didn't say that. And Sarah, sorry we missed you this time. It's a busy week for you, but we'll catch you next time. I'm Evan, by the way, McClanahan. That's my last name. Good German Lutheran name. I'm at First Lutheran here in Houston. And with me,
I'm Ken. I'm an accountant.
I'm Cody. I'm a community college professor in the area, and I'm on TikTok.
Yeah. This might be the most balanced White Pill Radio I've ever had, by the way, because I'm kind of like feeling a little outnumbered, you know? So.
I was saying it's a Mexican standoff because you're a liberal, you're a MAGA, and I'm an anarchist. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. Okay. Can we say Mexican standoff anymore? I don't know. But
Sure.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure. So, to the audience, look, check this out. Cody, look at your camera. Bam!
Hey,
Cody, he's got
go.
the Cody cam. Cody cam today. All right. Anyway, so I'll try to remember to do that from time to time. And for podcast people, we have a second camera that we're trying to use. Like to get a third, but we do need a producer. So, if somebody has like time to kill and you just want to come produce, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to push the buttons where everyone can see. Okay, let's jump in.
After the show, I have a recommendation for producer.
Excellent.
Oh, cool.
Speaking of podcasts, yeah, sorry,
Nope. That was the planned segue.
So we have a lot more non-traditional interviews this election season. Trump went on Theo Vaughn's podcast. He went on Flagrant. Kamala went on Call Her Daddy, which is just another, podcasty kind of a feminist vibe going on. And juxtaposed to her like Fox News interview, it's just night and day how much more you can get out of a candidate whenever they sit down, they have, an hour or two to just relax. They don't necessarily feel that the host is hostile. You can actually get them to bite a lot more bullets like Andrew Schultz or Theo Vaughn did, right? Theo Vaughn, confronted Trump a lot on the war on drugs, right? And in that interview, you could tell Trump really had no idea what fentanyl is, right? Just that it's bad. And Theo Vaughn, who's a notorious drug addict, who's now sober, kind of educated the audience and, hopefully Trump's audience on what's the difference between an upper and a downer,
It's one thing I love about Trump. He doesn't smoke, drink, or ever do drugs. So, yeah.
On Flagrant podcast with Andrew Schultz, we heard a lot more about Trump's foreign, not necessarily foreign policy with military intervention, but just the pressure that he would put on foreign companies. He said something that I'd never heard him say before, which is he stopped Nord Stream pipeline from happening in his administration, and that he was kind of upset.
This is the big natural gas pipeline from Russia to Europe.
Right.
That was mysteriously bombed in the Black Sea or whatever.
And I was like, wait a minute, hold on. Trump was against that before it was even built.
Yeah.
He claims to have had a hand in not getting it built. And you're never going to get that out of a very confrontational interview where they feel like they have to be on guard. So I'm looking forward to the rumors on Capitol Hill that both these candidates will be on Rogan soon for a 2.5, 3 hour interview.
Well,
it's going to be awesome.
And those, I think, went by the wayside with Brett Baer's interview with Kamala, which was last night or aired last night, which some people think she did a great job because she was feisty. Others say she filibustered and dodged and lost composure. So I guess it's in the eye of the beholder. But
They both were interrupting each other so much. It was so hard to watch.
But that's a 30-minute deal, right? And like you said, like this, it should just be noted, like for history's sake, that the advent of the podcast and the long form interview, which is crazy to kind of think about. Yeah. Because we're told on the one hand, like this is a short, we all have ADD, everything is short term, right? Bam, 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 bam. You know, you watch Fox News, which I haven't done in years, but it's like 7 minutes break, 7 minutes break, you know, everything is like divided out by segments. And then you have this medium come along and it's like, well, we got 3 hours to kill. You know, no interruptions. Like it's like kind of wild to think that, you know, like this is a format that is not only working, it's thriving. Now, a lot of that is because you don't have to sit and watch a TV. You can put on your headphones and just you take it with you wherever you go. I've listened to podcasts for 15 years now, but yeah, but it ends up revealing a lot about a person. Like, do they have the stamina? This was a whole thing with like Kennedy and Khrushchev. You know, they famously met at the Vienna talks. I think it was in 1961 or 2, and it was generally, you know, of course, Khrushchev knew everything about Kennedy. They knew he, you know, had great back pain. He wore back braces. He was on a lot of drugs, and they sat in one room for like 9 hours. And Kennedy basically confessed later it was absolutely excruciating. But anyway,
but you can't show weakness,
right? Yeah, you can't show weakness. So like a 3-hour interview, like you have to have stamina for that. You have to be able to think. You have to be introspective. Like you can't just memorize certain things. So a lot of people are saying, I would never be one of them, but a lot of people are saying, that Kamala would struggle with that, whereas Trump has actually done well. And so we're kind of back to that Nixon JFK debate thing, right? Yeah. Radio versus TV.
So, and the problem with Kamala is that she's probably not going to actually say anything of substance. And the problem with Trump is that he's going to contradict himself like 8 times. He'll take one position and then take another position.
Well, it's called a weave.
Right. Weaving, which is like, go check out the Trump weaves.
So, you know, I used to work on political campaigns, and sometimes that would be the media contact whenever we were talking to press at events. And basically, one of the things that I learned is when you're talking to the media, they're going to find a 5-second soundbite. So they'll interview you for 10 minutes and they will find 5 seconds. So what you have to practice doing is you rehearse a message, and no matter what they ask, you say that over and over and over again because you want the 5 seconds they show to be that. And I think that's a real downfall of how we've done things for the last 20 years. So I think a podcast where people talk for an extended period of time, I think that would be wonderful. So I think we should totally go for that.
Yeah. Maybe we can get them on this podcast. What do you think, Ken? You got any pull? You got any pull? You said you worked with candidates. So.
Well, maybe the libertarian candidate.
Yeah.
Chase Oliver. He's a character.
Yeah. Well, it is a change
on anti-war stuff. But.
Yeah, it is a change. It's a welcome change. It's an interesting change. I think it's a game changer. In fact, I think that it's quite possible that in future years, candidates from respective parties, not the way. I mean, both candidates we have were kind of odd how they came about to be the candidates this year. In future years, I think will be something people take into account. Can they sit down with Joe Rogan or someone like it for 3 hours?
I prefer a long form debate.
Oh, for sure.
That like isn't on a stage, no audience. The audience is the listeners. And you have maybe a moderator or two that it's not like hostile to either candidate, but
having hosted debates, I could propose a format, but I would love to see, for example, a cross-examination between the two candidates. That would be fascinating because that tells you how you think, how you answer questions, because the whole point of a cross-examination is to devise your questions in such a way that you paint your opponent into a corner. Mm-hmm. Like if you really think that you have the right position, then you should be able to do that and then see if they can wiggle their way out of it.
If y'all haven't read the records of the Lincoln-Douglas debates, they are really fascinating and really telling with just how the discourse in our country has degraded over the last 100
We think we're smart. It's like, bro, read letters from 200 years ago.
Yeah. So what I've always thought would be a great idea is just rent out a Mexican restaurant and have some chips and salsa on the table, some drinks, and then just have 5 cameras and the 2 candidates set there. Nobody else in the building, just the cameras, and the little thing comes on and says the cameras are now on, and you have 2 hours, have a conversation.
Well, maybe that'll be the evolution. We've gone from super rehearsed media, big media, to podcast to Mexican restaurants.
Why not all three? Like,
Yeah.
honestly, like, why do you?
Well, actually, I do think you need both. Actually,
why does it have to be exclusive?
Yeah.
You can have journalists.
And I think you can do friendly things, and you need to do adversarial things.
Exactly.
One of the friendly ones that Kamala did was the Up and Smoke with the two basketball players. And I mentioned it right at the end of my WPR, or White Pill Radio last time. I did get that article published. It is at Every Main Commentary. And because one of the things she said there was, like, progress in this country has basically only ever happened when people riot in the streets. And I'm like, wow, that is extremely short-sighted. There's been an extreme amount of progress, that didn't result from rioting, like air conditioning. I would say air conditioning is an example. There are 1,000 examples like that. But anyway, you can check that out and read that. But Cody, you have an article that I will admit I know nothing about this, so I look forward to learning of this.
So this may be old news by the time y'all watch or listen, but there's a guy named Robert Roberson who I think in 2003 was found guilty of killing his 2-year-old daughter through shaken baby syndrome. And there's been a lot of evidence since then that the science that convicted him is not valid science. And so the medical community is really, they debate about whether this is legitimate. And so he's supposed to be executed at 6:00. And right now it's like 5:15. And so all of the appeals are going unanswered. And so the only real option officially is that the governor can give a 30-day stay of execution. But we've also had something else really strange that's a separation of powers issue where a committee in the Texas legislature has met together and subpoenaed him for to meet before them next week. So this is kind of an interesting strategy that this legislative committee, bipartisan, 5 Republicans, 4 Democrats. So they have subpoenaed him for next week with the hopes that will force a stay of execution. So we'll see what happens.
Is this a typical Republican-Democrat issue where Democrats are opposed, generally speaking, Democrats oppose the death penalty, Republicans favor it. So is that following along partisan lines?
No, it's not. Like I say, this committee has several Republicans on there who are hoping to stay the execution. There's really a concern that this guy might be innocent, that he might have been found guilty on, they call it junk science, or I would just say science that they thought was correct at the time. But now, science has evolved, and the baby was having medical complications and was taken to the doctor in the days before. And so there's concern that maybe the baby died of natural causes and we might execute an innocent man. We really don't know either way. My personal thought is I don't understand the hurry.
Beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
If, you have half of the medical science saying I don't know, we need to revisit shaken baby syndrome. Every one of these people that's scheduled for death row, stay those executions. Yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, Evan, how do you feel about the death penalty?
I'm pro death penalty.
Sure.
Oh yeah.
No, I know. Just go on.
No, well, in this case, I don't know. In fact, there's a Netflix show. It's kind of a forensic true crime docuseries show, and it's on junk science. I don't remember the name of it.
I saw it. Blood splatter, bite marks. Yeah.
The bite mark was really interesting. So they're we watch Forensic Files or CSI, and you kind of come to the conclusion, oh, they've got this thing licked, and it's like, well, actually, DNA actually is not always as conclusive. So there are complications, and of course, your defense is often what you can afford. And these scientists that testify on your behalf are often, they're expensive, and the state doesn't have. Sometimes the state, it seems like, has unlimited resources, but not in every case. So, and also it could be that the state has the resources to bring in scientists to convict someone, and the defense has nothing. So junk science is real. Just because it's science. Follow the science, someone wisely said in 2020, or not so wisely. Their junk science is real. So I would say I would say that I do defend the death penalty. I would disagree with the general legal the way this usually works. I would not allow someone to plea bargain out of a death penalty, and that is something that frustrates me, where the prosecution will say, well, we know you did it, so if you go ahead and confess and we can save a trial, then we'll just do life without parole. I don't like that. If you do a death penalty offense, from my point of view, you should get the death penalty. And now they might say, well, that takes away the incentive to confess, and then we have to go through the process. We'll go through the process. Then maybe that's better. Like I do think there should be very conclusive proof. The Bible says 2 or 3 witnesses. One of the things I brought up on this podcast before is forensic science a witness? I think that's a question that we need some, conference to answer. And of course, we won't come to a firm conclusion on that because we never come to a firm conclusion or anything. But I think that, I want to say yes, but then like stories like this where I'm like, I don't know.
Even if you have witnesses, like humans don't lie, we know.
What I
mean? Like,
hence the 2 or 3. Yeah,
well,
but yes, but then they can
collusion
collude
has
to
never
lie.
happened in this world. Yeah,
Or people
there's
make
not
mistakes.
There's not perfect justice. Yeah,
sure. There's not perfect justice, which is why, right?
It's the reasonable doubt.
Yeah, it's the dark mirror analog to Tucker Carlson's poisoned M&Ms, right? Like he says, how many poisoned M&Ms would you be willing to eat?
Oh, right.
Or how many M&Ms would you be willing to eat in a bowl if you knew one of them was poisoned, right? And it's like, okay, well, take that, flip it, reverse it. How many innocent people are we willing to let die? Because the number's not going to be 0.
Right.
If we have a death penalty in this country, the number will never be 0.
Right.
So the question is, how many innocent people is tolerable?
Well, to flip that, the light mirror version would be how many victims do not get justice? Because that's what I think is often lost is we spend all of our time focusing on the criminal. And I'm assuming the person is a guilty criminal and not the victim, the people who are murdered, the people who are raped. And that's why we have a justice system. We have it for the victim. Sometimes people are accused of things, which turns them into a victim as well. Sometimes prosecutors are overzealous. I got that. Yeah. So I don't want to see an innocent person in jail or certainly on death row either. So this does seem, I will say this though, I'm going to be really controversial here. Why not? What do I have to lose? One of the big picture things going on, for lack of a better way of saying this, with RFK Jr., et cetera, Make America Healthy Again, there is now a real movement looking at things like vaccines, childhood vaccine schedules, and things like that. There is an openness to that we have never had before, period. And it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger over time. I think there's going to be a lot, if Trump wins, I think there is going to be a Pandora's box opened on the pharmaceutical, healthcare, government collusion, industry complex, et cetera.
And did Operation Warp Speed. That guy.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, but think about it. If you disagree with Operation Warp Speed, he is bringing on his biggest critic of that in RFK Jr. Yeah. Doesn't he get credit for that? I think so. I think he should. Anyway, why do I bring that up? Well, SIDS. What is SIDS? Sudden infant death syndrome. Well, what is that? Babies just die in their sleep. There have been people who have said, I don't know if it's true or not, that this is it's a vaccine injury, essentially. That
I think babies have probably been dying in their sleep since humans have been a thing.
I don't know. It seems like a recent diagnosis.
What everyone's had, okay, so take dogs and cats, right? Everyone's had a litter of dogs or a litter of kittens, and, not all of them make it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I honestly think since humans have been a thing.
That may be.
I'm
just putting it sort of out there. I'm just dropping a bomb and then walking away. You can deal with the fallout. No, I would 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I'm curious if SIDS might be one of those things where we're like, well, we just thought kids were dying for no reason. Well, actually, when we give people 6 shots at a time and they're 4 weeks old and they don't actually need all those vaccines, maybe their body was reacting against it and they died suddenly. Shaken baby syndrome is I don't know, is that a new thing? Surely not. People have been shaking babies for a long time, but it seems like the diagnosis of it is kind of relatively recent.
Yeah, I don't know anything about this, but I think they said in the article that it really came about in the 80s as a theory. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a reason you don't hear about it anymore, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it does happen, and whether or not it happened with him, but I think I would generally agree with you that you can agree that the death penalty is on the table. You might also say at the same time that it should be extremely rare, and it should only be in cases where the proof is absolute. The real point of departure I would make, and the point that I would kind of usually disagree with most people is, I don't think people should be able to plead their way out of it. Confession doesn't. If you did the crime, you're guilty.
Well, I'm sure you and I have tons of problems with plea bargaining,
oh yeah,
as
absolutely
a concept. Yeah,
certainly.
Why?
But
To get somebody to admit to something that either they didn't do, or to deny justice by making somebody, admit something lesser so that they can get like a higher up or something. Right? I really do think that's a denial of justice, right? Either one, you're over convicting because somebody says, oh my goodness, I'm facing 20 years if I take a trial because this judge is going to have it out for me. Yes. Which is what the prosecutors explicitly tell you when they're trying to get you a plea bargain.
Right.
It's like, you want to waste the judge's time? Right. You're looking at 20 years.
Right. And most of the time, the people who plea bargain are people who don't have a lot of money, so they know they didn't buy the best attorney. They bought the cheapest one. And so, do I really want to risk my next 20 years on this guy that I saw in the yellow pages who's not the best?
When I can take a plea bargain for a lesser crime and get 5, right? Alec Baldwin and O.J. Simpson prove that we don't have equality under the law. We just don't. Whoever can afford the better lawyers is going to get free, right? Not all the time.
You think O.J. did it?
There's a
could have been junk science.
Little bit of a conspiracy theory, but I think there's a non-zero chance that it could have been his son. But we'll get into that later.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
interesting. Okay. Well, anyway, There was a podcast I used to listen to that was actually recommended by a conservative, Michelle Malkin, and it was Innocence Project adjacent, if not directly. And actually, I listened to a lot of episodes, and I was convinced there were definitely people in death row who were innocent. But not every time the Innocence Project gets involved, although they have a lot of, they tend to choose the best possible cases for their cause. I don't agree with them every time by any means, but there are times
either, right?
Yeah,
like they're going to say, okay, we messed this one up. Yeah.
But one of the things that happens a lot is your defense attorney that you're given, right, is just trying to get through the day, and he wants you to plea. He's not going to put up a defense.
He's got 6 other cases in his docket. Yeah.
Okay. This was an article that made headlines. Christopher Rufo. He is a pretty well-known conservative at this point. And, big on the DEI, CRT stuff. And he put out a Twitter thread that basically said...
Hey, guys. Sarah Stone here. Sorry to interrupt what I'm sure is a riveting podcast episode, but Theology by the Pint needs your help to continue providing these podcasts, offering our in-person events, and growing so we can bring thoughtful conversation and the hope of the gospel to a world that's increasingly walking away from church and from faith. Now that we're a 501c3 nonprofit, all donations are tax deductible, so we've crunched the numbers, and if each listener of this episode gave just $1 for each episode you listen to, we'd put a huge dent in our annual budget. So consider giving today. Go to theologybythepint.org/give and click the link to donate. Thanks so much, and now back to our show.
He didn't actually do it, but he used an Austrian plagiarism hunter, quote unquote, Dr. Stefan Weber, who has taken down politicians in the German-speaking world. And basically what he does is he uses plagiarism software to look at the public writings of people with, I don't know how I guess they use AI to scan the internet or something to basically see whether they've committed plagiarism or not. Claudine Gay, we talked about this a while back when she was the president of Harvard. She was demoted. She's only making $900,000 now to teach a class or two. So, everyone get out your violin and play a song for her. But she was accused of plagiarism, and Harvard ultimately had to admit it. Although there's always this negotiation first. Well, it's not as bad as you say, and finally they admit it is plagiarism. Now, in an academic setting, it's a big no-no. You're told not to do it as a student. It's a zero tolerance. You're a professor, so I want to hear what your thoughts are as well. But and they give lots of examples. One of the things Christopher Rufo did as well is he gave a few examples. He let the New York Times defend her, and then he said, "Oh, I got more examples." And then so the next day it was like boom, 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 and it's clearly by any standard plagiarism. It's from works of other people. It's from Wikipedia. It's pretty embarrassing. It could have easily been avoided by simply putting things in quotations or attribution. So I'm guessing that if this is ever commented on, it'll be, it was an oversight and, blah, blah, blah. But to me, it speaks to two things. Some people, again, I use that passive voice a lot today, aren't I? Are concerned that Vice President Harris is just not up to the job. That being president's like the hardest job on earth. United States is a big country. It's very complex, big economy. Got to make a lot of hard decisions. And if you're stealing from other people's work, then it shows maybe you don't have the brain power, I'm just going to say it, to do a really, really difficult job. 2, it's a question of integrity, especially if you're an attorney, district attorney, et cetera, at that. Like, plagiarism is something that you just shouldn't do. You should have the personal integrity to quote people correctly, when you do your work. So anyway, as a Christian, from a moral point of view, I guess my question is this as wrong as some people want to say, or is this just kind of a lame gotcha thing in October before a presidential debate or election?
Yeah, man, I have all the mixed views. Just to start out, we're talking about brain power and all that sort of thing. Got to remind everybody that she'll be running against the oldest president in history. So there's issues there. And also, Melania Trump plagiarized Michelle Obama's speech one time. So this isn't, isn't just one side. But I don't really know how I feel about this. In academia, I am 100% against plagiarism. And I think I am against this plagiarism here too.
It's not an academic book.
It was in a book. Yeah.
It was, kind of a memoir or whatever.
Yeah, but I also have to remember that so many politicians have ghostwriters and speechwriters, and that what they're saying ain't their words anyway. They are things that somebody else has written that they're taking credit for, and that's just like the majority of the time. So how different is this than someone having a speech written for them or a ghostwriter?
I don't think Trump wrote The Art of the Deal.
Oh, no, he definitely had a ghostwriter. His ghostwriter came out, in fact, in 2016 and said, you should never vote for him. He's a terrible person. And
right.
Blah, blah, blah. Have you ever heard Trump talk? Of course he didn't write that book.
I know.
He was sitting there going, I think when you negotiate, do that.
Right.
And the guy put it in English,
Yeah. So I'm against it. I don't think that she should have plagiarized, if that's assuming this, this is accurate and everything. But is it different than having a ghostwriter or a speechwriter? I don't know.
Definitely, right? Yeah. It's different than having a ghostwriter. But as far as plagiarism, the earliest thing I can remember about Kamala Harris, which was back in the 2020 campaign, was the Freedom. Video.
That's actually worse. Yeah.
So, it is straight up plagiarizing a story from Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King Jr. Said he walked up to a baby on a stroller, and he said, "And what do you want, little missy?" And she goes, "Freedom." Well, then, cut to an interview 20, 40, however many years later, actually, way, like probably 60 years later, Kamala Harris is in an interview saying that her grandmother took her to a rally, and a lady walked up to her grandmother and said, like, "Hey, why are you here? What's going on?" And then looked down at little baby Kamala Harris in a stroller and said, "And what do you want?" And baby Kamala Harris says, "Freedom." Okay. I mean,
yeah.
So,
yeah.
It could have happened twice, but it sounds exactly the same.
Right. Well, or the grandma could have plagiarized it.
The grandma could have plagiarized it too.
And she heard the story.
Good point.
Yeah. Well, there is nothing new under the sun,
Right.
So maybe we're all kind of plagiarists in our own way. But if you are borrowing from somebody, you need to you give attribution.
Completely agree.
Yeah. What do you do plagiarism tests for your students?
Yeah, we have a program called Turn It In. We're in this weird spot right now where we don't quite know how to check for AI.
Yeah.
We have an AI detector that tells us with 100% certainty this is AI, or with 50%. And we're all kind of scared to use it because, what we will usually, oh man, my students might be watching. What we will usually do is if we catch a student, it says 100% AI, we will bring them in and say something like, "I know you used AI for this," and see if we get them to confess.
Oh, this is like a plea bargain situation. Yeah.
A little bit, yeah. But we're scared to take this actually through the system because can we really trust this detector?
The AI stuff's not there yet. If you've ever used AI on your computer and then you're Googling something, and then the first couple results are AI, so often wrong.
Right.
And also you can put portions of the King James Bible in an AI detector, and it'll come up like 90% plagiarized. It's like,
Yeah.
what? No.
I've heard that too. I've heard authors will copy and paste their own stuff they know they wrote,
Yes.
and then the AI detector will say they did it. So
Right.
there's a whole thing about the devolution of AI, how ChatGPT is actually giving you wrong information now, how the math problems aren't getting solved right and stuff like that. So I don't know. So there are times when I wonder if AI is going to, it's the snake eating its own tail, like it's going to, it'll end up having limited results. Maybe that's not the right metaphor, but anyway, well, it's interesting. Plagiarism is bad, but doesn't seem like that article is really going anywhere either at the same time, right? Like Brett Baer didn't ask her about it, for example. Okay, this is an article from The Blaze, which is really, I probably should have just grabbed Lisa Ling's CBS Mornings article, and I'm not going to dwell on this. I left the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. Our church did in 2011. So, I'm not into the kind of liberal, progressive, Protestant version of Christianity these days. But Drew Stever, a female minister in the ELCA, Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, who identifies as a man, recently generated controversy by suggesting that gender ideology's incompatibility with biblical teaching, particularly about sex, demonstrated a deficit in the Bible. Lisa Ling, which is interesting because Lisa Ling, we just did an article from her about the non-Christian communities that are popping up, these kind of like non-Christian churches. So anyway, did y'all have Channel 1 when you were kids?
Yes.
You did? Yeah. Okay, like the TV in your classroom where you
like
had the 10
grade,
minute.
yes.
Yeah. So Lisa, that's how I know Lisa Ling. I don't know if you remember her from that. Anyway,
I don't remember that.
I think when she was like super young, that's how she got her start. Anyway, there's a lot of people who say, let me go back. Lisa Ling of CBS Mornings told Stever in a recent interview that there are a lot of people, anyway, who say that according to the Bible, God made man and woman, and that couldn't be any more clearly defined. Well, I would tend to agree with that. And there's a Pew Research poll that cited, and how do you respond to them? Stever says, it's hard to relate it to modern day times, who serves as lead pastor of Hope Lutheran Church in Hollywood. Because it wasn't written for 2024, it was written for them. So I don't necessarily want to debate this person or what the contents of this article. What I'm interested in are a couple of claims made, which are, is that how the Bible works? Is there an evolution in what the Bible says? To what degree do we look at things in the Bible as written for those people and only those people? Because we probably would agree with it about some things. I mean, the obvious example would be something like kosher laws, food laws, Jewish laws that are fulfilled in Christ, and therefore we can eat whatever we want or something.
I was going to say war slaves, but okay, shrimp.
Yeah, well, yeah. Now, the only thing I would say about that is that there have been discussions as to whether or not biblical slavery is chattel slavery, and so are there important distinctions made there? Peter Williams gave a lecture at Lanier on biblical slavery, and it's quite interesting. He actually contends that every time the word slave is used in the Old Testament, the word should be translated as servant, whereas every time it's used in the New Testament, it should be slave. So interesting connotation. But yes, let's just say things change, right?
Yeah.
Does this change? Is this one of those things that changes? Male, female, transgender?
You want to go first?
Go for it.
Oh man, so I talked the last time I was on about how what we call gender a lot of times we mean something other than sex, right? For example, what is a man, right? We might say it's a guy or a male that's over the age of 18, or you're not a real man unless you do this, right? So there's a cultural component to it, so I think that culture, the idea of what is a man, what is a real man, some of that stuff changes over time. What was normal for Paul, I think there are things, that Paul writes in his letters that this is what Paul was writing to the Corinthians. Is it necessarily to us? I don't know, right? I don't know that that's the case, some of the things that he writes and so forth. Does it change that much? Yeah, I don't know. I'm not enough of a Bible scholar to say either way. So
like the Bible isn't one thing, right? The Bible tells us, this back in the day, but now, like, we can't do that anymore because it wasn't written to us. Well, the Bible wasn't written to any one person, right? The Bible was written, and it's a library full of a lot of different genres, written to a lot of different people over a very long period of time, right? So, no, the Bible wasn't written to you, but it also wasn't only written to the Corinthians, and it wasn't only written to the Israelites coming out of Egypt. It was written to a lot of different people across time. Now, about the man-woman thing, right? Certainly, it says lots of different things about men and women, and you might even say it contradicts itself, right? There's a lot of man and woman like hierarchies in the Old Testament, specifically one man and multiple wives, that are contradicted in the New Testament. But that's not what we're talking about here.
Well, I don't know that I agree with that, because I would say that what Jesus does is when his authoritative teaching goes back to creation, right?
Sure.
You have heard it said, or no, he doesn't say that. He just says, in the beginning was one male and female. God made them male and female. Sorry, Mark 10. And that was teaching on divorce. So I would say that polygamy was a deviation from, it wasn't ever commended by God. It was allowed by God under certain circumstances, but it was never said to be good.
I would say Moses said it was allowed by God, and that's kind of where I'm going to differentiate from all of the inerrantists. But yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
but again, that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
We're talking about the transgender problem.
Right.
Right.
But with those, could that just be on some level a reflection of the culture that they were part of? So that was the norm in Mesopotamia to have polygamy, but in the Roman Empire, that wasn't the norm. So we can see those differences.
but hasn't like reproduction always been a norm? Like, that's not a weird thing, right? That a man and a woman would have sex and have kids, and like there'd be a family.
Paul says not to. But.
Well,
That's true. Paul thought Jesus was coming back like tomorrow.
Yeah.
So like, I'm going to get married.
And it's actually that one of the more interesting things that Paul does, is where he's talking about precisely marriage. And he's like, I'm telling you this, this may not be from God,
lot, yeah.
And it's, well, I don't know that he does it a lot. I mean, he specifically does it here where he's like, like he kind of hedges. It's like, I'm going to say this, and I can't be certain that, this is, that God would agree with me on this.
Speaking of God, right?
Yeah.
He'll say that.
So, but, I don't know. The very concept, though, that the Bible is hard to relate to modern day times. Well, in some way that's true. The Bible doesn't tell us, the ideal, hard drive size on a computer or something like that. The Bible doesn't tell us, lots of things. So we have to take, biblical principles and apply them to modern day. So it might be hard. But the fact is, I do think we have to categorically reject the idea that the Bible wasn't written for us, that it was written, in a sense, again, it was written for the Ephesians and the Corinthians and, the residents of Judah who are about to get destroyed by the Babylonians. I got that. But we can still read Jeremiah and we can say, but this is still true, and I think when it comes to marriage and family and sex, like none of that has really changed, So I don't know. I just thought it was, these people get all the attention. They make the Lutherans look bad because
When you say sex, do you mean like scientifically, like the like sex and gender sex, or sex is in like, the thing that makes babies?
I don't remember what I said now.
Oh,
But-
sorry. You said the things like marriage and sex haven't changed since then. Do you mean
I would say
the thing that makes babies? Or,
Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought you were referring to like sex and gender.
Yeah.
Because I did just want to not dive into it, but point everyone back to our Iman Khalif boxer conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Where for 99.9% of the world and percent of humans, the bell curves that are distributions for like what is a man and what is a woman are really easy to answer, right? Biology's weird though. And there are some really, really tricky cases to ask.
Yeah,
is this
but
a man or
that's-
is this a
yes,
woman?
yes,
And
okay.
go back and listen to that episode.
Yeah,
It's a good one.
I agree.
Yeah.
But that is not her situation.
I know.
Yeah, she or he is basically pushing her own agenda. This is what really bothers me. And this is in part why we left the ELCA. And what is going on in all of the liberal Protestant churches, which would be the ELCA, the Presbyterian Church USA, the Episcopal Church, the United Church of Christ, which has been going on for years. Fun fact, the first ever openly gay man was a son of this congregation. Probably attended Sunday school
In the ELCA.
this was United Church of Christ in 1968.
But not the first ever openly gay man.
Yeah. No, he's not the first openly gay man, but the first ever openly gay man to be ordained into a Christian denomination in the late 60s in the United Church of Christ was a son of this congregation and likely went to Sunday school in the very room we are sitting right now.
Huh.
So his name was Johnson, I think, Bill Johnson. That might not be right. Anyway, its last name is Johnson. Anyway, so it's a small world. But the major divide between the liberal Protestant denominations, some of which are the Methodist Church these days, and those of us who are in more conservative camps, it is this relationship to the Bible. We basically place ourselves at the authority of the Bible, and we say, God, tell us how to live, and it does, and we're like, okay. And the others are like, well, the Bible said this, but, we think we are in an authoritative, definitive position to say it's wrong. Mm-hmm. And that is an intolerable, and that's why whenever there is, let me finish that thought. That is an intolerable way to relate to the Bible if it is truly God's word. It is a sinful way to relate to the Bible. And that is why when these denominations and these church bodies, when they're having these conservative liberal splits, which obviously is the story of mainline Protestantism for the last 30 years, they'll always talk about unity and big tents and we can hold it all together. The Episcopal Church is sort of famous for this because they're all about the church, not necessarily the doctrine, I would argue. But it's phony. It's false. Like, you cannot have unity if, your relationship to the Bible is, well, that doesn't apply to me. No, the first step toward the Bible is, it has authority. I'm going to listen to what it says. Right. Anyway.
So, yeah, again, I'm not a theologian, so I don't want to
Everyone's a theologian. If Sarah were here, she would want me to say that.
So, but we admitted that there are parts where Paul says, this is just me talking, right? And that's in the Bible.
The Bible? Yeah.
So if we say that the entire Bible is the word of God, but then we start saying, obviously this part isn't, then at what, how do we do this?
I was going to say, you're a Lutheran. Didn't Martin Luther call James the Epistle of Straw?
He also wrote some very powerful sermons on James later in life.
Okay.
James and Esther, I think, are the two books of the Bible that do not name God specifically. Mm-hmm. And so, and of course, Catholics use James.
No.
Faithful
James,
that works
the
is
servant
dead.
of God and the Lord Jesus Christ is well scattered abroad.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The first part. You may be, yes. Yeah. Okay. There's something. Well, anyway, he didn't like what how the Roman Catholics would use it in terms of faith without works is dead. Right. And so basically the whole faith alone argument hinges on James. So, but he didn't actually want to kick it out of the canon. But I would say this. I agree with you. You can take it on kind of a case-by-case basis or an issue-by-issue basis. Mm-hmm. And you would basically say, all right, well, what is the case for, saying homosexual acts are wrong? What is the case for not eating bacon? Are those equivalent? I mean, yes, I have heard bishops go to Lutheran churches leaving the ELCA and say that very thing. That is so stupid and so shallow because obviously the ability of Christians to eat whatever they want is clearly said by Jesus in Acts 10. Or it's not what goes into your mouth that defiles a person, but what goes out of your mouth that defiles a person. So I think there are many examples where you could contradict that, say kosher food laws. So to equate that to something like homosexual acts, which are clearly forbidden in the Old Testament, clearly forbidden in the New Testament.
But Jesus didn't say anything about them.
Oh, no, I would disagree.
You're going to say Genesis, in the beginning.
Yeah, when he teaches on marriage and he says God made them male and female, I think, and he uses the phrase porneia in the Greek when talking about sexual immorality, and I would argue that in a Jewish context that would have included a myriad of sexual sins, including homosexuality. But anyway, so I do think that there's a weighting system to all of this, and you have to debate it issue by issue.
But I don't like saying the word capital T, capital B, the Bible, right? Yeah. Says, the Bible says, right? Now, I mean, I think like you, I'm a Christian. I'm not a Bibleian, right? I do prioritize parts of the Bible, and then the other ones are useful for instruction, useful for correction, useful for whatever Timothy says. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
But I am a follower of Christ.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The danger of that can be the Andy Stanley approach, where he did this whole unhitching thing maybe 5 years ago, where he wanted to unhitch Jesus and Christianity from the Old Testament specifically. And anyway, I think that's a fatal error as well that we can't get into. But there can be a piety or a piousness or a pietism that says, I only follow Jesus. But Jesus also upheld certain things. I'm not saying you're doing that, but
and there's a piety in the other direction where you have the Pentecostal preacher saying like, I follow the Bible, right? You have piety in both directions.
No, I agree.
Right.
I agree. There are, believe it or not, there are people with theology on tap that consider me kind of liberal on some issues.
Yeah.
Because I don't think certain things in the Bible are
Well, hey,
liberal.
you drink and I don't. I mean, come on, dude.
Yeah.
Many of my teenage years, I went to this little church here in Houston where we held up our Bible every morning or every Sunday and said, "This is my Bible. I am what it says I am." And So.
Yeah, that's a small church. I'm surprised they're still around. They're so small. They were on the verge of dying there for a while.
Right.
Okay. The Guardian has an article about Trump and Vance and Elon.
Back to politics.
Yeah, let's go. Explain this one to me.
Okay, so if y'all haven't been following the Twitter controversy recently, or X, or Twix, whatever, there was a leaked dossier. It was actually Trump's investigation to see whether or not J.D. Vance would be a good
vetting.
It was a vetting document, right?
Yep.
I was going to say Oppo research, but it wasn't Oppo research. It was vetting research. Yeah, on J.D. Vance. That got leaked. And Elon Musk, very clearly is coming from the top, seems to be the one that put the kibosh on this particular document being shared on, Twitter, which some of us seem to remember the very reason why he bought Twitter was because of the Hunter Biden suppression of the story that, the Hunter Biden laptop leaks, which are a little bit different than hacked material. But I seem to think all of us are probably pretty on board with like Julian Assange, and the hacked material isn't necessarily the part that we have a problem with, right?
Let me think about that.
Julian Assange, hacked material.
Yeah.
That blade cuts both ways.
I would say I'd have to think about this. Well, first of all, I wouldn't equate it to the Hunter Biden situation
I wouldn't either.
because
The laptop,
there is a standard policy. You leave it at my shop for 60 or 90 days or whatever it was. It's mine.
The hardware. There is a legal gray area about software, though.
Oh, okay.
The hardware does belong to the owner, though.
Yes. Okay.
So
Well, but if the pictures and the
question,
emails are on the hardware, that's interesting. Okay.
it's a very legal gray area. And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would also say that the information on that laptop was clearly demonstrative of at least at the very least the son of the former vice president, future president perhaps, doing huge business deals with overseas people, and at the very least you would want to know if there were any kickbacks or quid pro quos or any favors.
Guy?
Yeah, who's the big guy? And the shell companies and the money that exchanged, and why were there 20 LLCs that spread money around that did nothing? I mean, were there any favors for any of this in return? Joe Biden's on video saying, if you don't fire this guy, you're not going to get your $1 billion in Ukraine.
We're on board with that being fair play.
Yeah.
I think you and I are probably on board with the J.D. Vance thing being fair play.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
But it is hacked material, right?
It is hacked material, but
Okay.
I think all of us are probably on board with Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. So
Yeah.
again, I don't think the hacked material is going to be the hill that we want to
So
die on.
what dirt did they find on J.D. Vance? I'm dying to know.
So the dirt that they found on J.D. Vance was mostly that he's kind of a liberal dude. Like he was strongly against Trump's tax cuts, talked about the importance of like a social safety net for families. In these documents, he even goes as far, like he supported keeping the individual mandate on the Affordable Care Act, right? When Trump was getting everyone to try to overturn that, and then there was that thing with John McCain.
Well, it was overturned, right?
It was.
Because you don't have to pay your fine if you don't have insurance.
Right.
Okay.
The individual mandate, I think, was one of the worst things about the
Yeah, well,
Affordable
just
Care
that's what
Act.
the individual mandate is.
Right,
if
right,
you don't have health insurance, if you can't prove it that you had it, then you have to pay.
Justice Roberts, it's not a mandate, it's a tax. Right. And
I cannot believe he did that.
So, he really wasn't as conservative as he's making himself out to be now, right? Which is why it probably would behoove the Republican establishment to keep this, under wraps.
Yeah.
And I think it's totally fine to get released. Now, do you have to release the document? Well, what if a reporter starts talking about the document? Well, some of them have gotten blocked on Twitter as well, just talking about the contents of the document without actually posting the contents. So the question is, do we think Elon Musk is an honest actor here, principled and, steadfast, or do we think he's another partisan?
Well, I do think he's more partisan these days because I think that he sees the persecution, if you want to call it that, of President Trump by 4 different jurisdictions or 3 different jurisdictions, 4 different cases, actually like 6 cases when you look at some of the civil things. So I think he looks at the Twitter files, the suppression of free speech and things like that. I think that he does feel like, there is a deep state blob, to coin a phrase, to borrow a phrase, that is not particularly interested in defending the Constitution or the freedom of speech or the right to bear arms, et cetera, and that if they win, that we maybe won't have free elections in the future. Or it'll become like California style, one state, I mean, this is what he said, one party nation, where, you will still have elections, but they won't be legitimate elections, that it'll be one party rule through a seemingly democratic system. So, I think he's gotten more... more partisan that way.
And less free speech.
But I will say this: would you have any complaint if is WikiLeaks on X?
Is WikiLeaks on? Well, you were allowed to share the WikiLeaks documents on even Twitter back in the day. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, even though they were hacked material. The hacked material thing, really was a soft touch policy that they had.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I guess 2 things. The Vance situation is a personal information, right? I mean, could it be?
There's a bit of that, and you can redact it. I mean, you can get the classic black rectangle, and it was like 3 sentences that you can easily redact, and it doesn't excuse him from blocking people that were just reporting on it.
And are they? Is it a matter of national security? That would be my other thing.
So leaks are okay if it's national security, but hacked material might be okay if it's like Edward's. Well, hold on, Edward Snowden goes the other way, right? National security, the people shouting national security were the ones against Edward Snowden.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm. But they've mostly changed their mind.
Well.
So, I mean, most Republicans support Edward Snowden, whereas before it was the other way around.
You don't get the benefit of hindsight, though. At the time, it was the Republicans
I agree.
that passed the Patriot Act that were all, against Edward Snowden. Yeah. To me, it's about the, partisans killing principles, right? Yeah. Partisanship is going to kill. The whole Nancy Pelosi wasn't home. So a guy with a hammer waited with her husband until Nancy could show up, until the cops came, and then he smacked Paul Pelosi in the head with a hammer. Yeah. Horrible. And I saw tons of Republicans making jokes about that, which I don't support the jokes, but I'm a free speech absolutist, right? I think those should have been allowed on Twitter. However, people making, ketchup packet or whatever the jokes about the Trump assassination attempt were blocked from X. Yeah. And I don't know. I'm a free speech absolutist, right? But this just seems like blatant partisan hypocrisy.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, with all the social media platforms, they're privately owned, right? That's their private property. Mm-hmm. So under our current laws, it seems like they should be able to censor them however they want. And we don't seem to like that. But the alternative seems to be that the government can step in and say, here are the policies. But I know a lot of people wouldn't like that either. So I kind of just see it as, I don't like that he's censoring things, but he owns it.
I'm not making a government case, right? Yeah. This is not the government should stop him from doing this. You'll never.
You're just saying it's hypocrisy,
right?
Yeah. Yes. If X is the free speech platform, I just don't know that hacked material are free speech. I would say that things like the Pentagon Papers back in the day, and in the Julian Assange files and things like that. I mean, if they're revealing to us secrets, about our government that are getting people killed and that are, wasting tax or making taxpayers implicit in the, murder of innocent civilians in other parts of the world, or they're spying on us. I think that is something that we should know. J.D. Vance's dossier, and unless it turns up that he's a spy, I tend to think that's different. And I think you can make that distinction in free speech absolutist. Yeah, I'm sure there are things that you would say, we should have some right to privacy too, though. Yeah. Not in an abortion sense, but in a, civil society sense.
Yeah. I don't support the hackers. I don't support WikiLeaks and all of that. But at the same time, if a reporter didn't do it and they hear it from a source, I believe that reporter has freedom of the press.
Yeah. I'll go on the record. I support WikiLeaks, and I'm glad Julian Assange is free.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Here's
that's
my
another
stance.
major change is Don Jr., is telling his dad, free Julian Assange. which he has been now.
Yeah. Yeah. My thought is that when they're taking government documents and releasing them to the public, they're not people that we elected to do that. I get that they see that they're people who are exposing everything, but I think the better option would be to go to a congressperson and say, this is what I got. Do you want to? Somebody who's been elected by the voters, elected by the people, and then Congress can decide what to do with it. But the people should have a say.
Elected by the voters and bought by the lobbyists.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Well, we should get money out of politics too.
Politicians.
I would say
I don't think that's the solution.
my question stands is, what dirt did they dig up on the guy? And the answer is basically nothing. Like the individual mandate, that's the best he got. A policy difference, the guy is clean as a whistle.
Nothing illegal, but very, very, very like opposite to what you think he is now. Right.
I don't know,
but I feel like we've already known this. Like
he was advocating for like universal health care in this document.
No,
Back in the day, after Hillbilly Elegy, it was like we have so many people that need a social safety net. Now
that's not necessarily universal health care, but okay.
I think that we've always kind of known that he's like a guy walking around with his antenna up in the air, like trying to figure out which way the wind's blowing. Okay, this is how I can advance my career. That's just how he's always seemed to me.
And people change, but like Kamala Harris, right? Ask him, why was this your position? Why is this your position now? And
but they
what
have
made you change?
Like he has done many like Sunday morning like antagonistic interviews.
About the
she's
Nazi
done
comment.
one.
It's always about the Nazi comment.
Well, no,
You called Trump a Nazi
they asked him about. I mean, I haven't watched them all, but they've asked him about other areas that he changed on. Like you weren't a Trump supporter. I mean, the Nazi comment is one thing, but he was. But yeah, no.
I've heard that one.
Look, I will say this, though. I don't think he's a disingenuous person because I don't think I'm a disingenuous person. I don't think my wife is a I shouldn't out my wife maybe. But, I don't think people that in 2016 either really didn't like Trump and, but didn't want to see Clinton win, so they voted for him, but they've since come to be his biggest fan. It's like the meme of, voting for Trump in 2016 is Mel Gibson from a romantic comedy, and in 2024 it's like Mel Gibson and Braveheart, right? It's like, I'm all in, right? I'm a maniac. So like I have gone through that progression as well. And also like half of the GOP, if not 2/3 of the GOP, has become a nationalist populist movement, not standard bearer GOP. This is the major shift that has happened. He has pulled off a coup, if you will, of the GOP by becoming a populist movement within the GOP. Like no one has done that in the Democrat Party. Like it was Huey P. Long that last, had major influence in the Democrat Party.
I mean, maybe Bernie before the dawn of Brazil.
Yeah, and look what they did to him. Look what they did to him. Well, they literally kept the guy from winning. And he just sat there and took it, So, I mean, Trump exerted his will on a party, and a lot of people in the last 8 years have been like, he was right. He saw, and it wasn't just him. I mean, there are, economists, there have been people who have been influential in his world that said the way that we're doing things, the Bush version of republicanism, that's not where we need to go. We need to make America great again.
In this document, Vance criticized the Trump immigration policies. Now, this would have been back in like 2018-ish, but he thought leading up to the 2020 election.
All I'm saying is, bro, they're looking for a. Is that me?
It's not illegal. No,
it is. Okay. Is that? All I'm saying is they were looking for the affair, and they got tax policy. So they were like, womp womp. That's all. Okay. Last article because we are out of time. But this was I'm going to go to the one we all kind of want to talk about. This was a gentleman posted about the fact that his wife, who peacefully protested outside an abortion clinic using the FACE Act, we've talked about this before, is going to prison for 3.5 years. And I know that there are people very high up and very close to Trump who have said, the moment he's inaugurated, we'll pardon you on day one. This is a beautiful black woman with a young family. Basically, this is one of the anarcho-tyrannies that I think is disgusting so many people right now. And it is leading a lot of average people to, reconsider their political affiliation. We see people knocking up, convenience stores, jewelry stores. We see in San Francisco, $950 is the threshold for a felony, but otherwise you can shoplift. And we basically feel like there are no penalties. There are no penalties for coming into our country illegally. There are no penalties for beating up cops. There are no penalties over and over. We feel this way, and maybe those stories are overblown or whatever. By the way, the story that didn't make the stack today was the FBI numbers have totally revised on crime. Turns out Trump was right about that. The FBI did cherry pick data, and the numbers came back way, basically saying there have been huge crime increases in the last few years. But that said, someone who peacefully protests in front of an abortion clinic goes to federal prison. This just seems crazy to me and unjust. And I hope Trump wins and pardons her.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know about this because, I completely would agree that peaceful protesters should not be punished. And all the rioters and looters and everything, if they're caught, I think they should be punished too. If they get away, of course, we don't know who they are, but they should be punished for their crimes. But yeah, this just seems so odd to me. So I looked it up, and from what I could make out of it, she forcefully stood in front of the door and wouldn't get out of the way. And when someone was trying to come in, somebody had their hand in the door, and she closed the door shut and apparently closed it on their hand, from what I found. So if that's right,
3.5 years federal prison.
That's more than I would go for. But if that's what the jury says, we go back to all the other things, right?
The juries don't sentence. Juries just decide guilt or innocence, right?
Right, yes.
This is a judge.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's probably not what I would go for. I don't know if that's what they sentenced or that's what they're pushing for. But yeah, I mean, if she committed the crime, then whatever the punishment is, and I would say that if she was really doing what she believes, history's full of people who had to face punishments for what they believe, and hopefully it will just.
I'll give it another example though,
Yeah,
because this was so reprehensible. There was a black woman who clearly has mental problems.
right.
Killed a 3-year-old boy in a grocery store parking lot not that long ago. She will not, as far as I can tell, she will not receive prison time. She's being evaluated for psychological problems. Then there were the 2 kids joyriding who videotaped themselves running over a retired deputy, I think in Las Vegas. They just said he's not competent to stand trial. This is what I'm talking about. You can run over and murder a man who sacrificed and served his community for his entire life, and looks like he might totally get off.
Well, it's Las Vegas. This is Alabama. We are we have federalism, right? It's going to be different state to state. Blame the state. Don't blame the entire system.
Yeah.
Right. And I would go back to, we have an adversarial justice system. It's 2 lawyers battling it out. And if, the one who's best is going to charge more. And so that's a reality.
And to your point of anarcho-tyranny, that sword cuts both ways. During the Black Lives Matter riots, there was no shortage of videos that would show police brutalizing legitimately peaceful protesters when 2 blocks away, a target's being burnt to the ground, right? Why? Cops love soft targets, right? These people are peaceful protesting. I'm not going in there. Those people might have guns, right?
Yeah.
But again, to the point about your it's so hard because I'm part of the anti-war movement, and seeing these dorks on college campuses with the Hamas stuff, screaming whenever a police arrests them for assaulting somebody else, right? Your forefathers in the anti-war movement went to jail for burning their draft cards, right? And they gladly went to jail, and they proudly said, I'm doing the right thing and I'm being arrested for it, right? This is I will take my punishment as, a middle finger to the system, right? You think abortion's murder, right? Instead of screaming foul play, scream foul play, sure. But also, take your lumps, be a martyr, be the martyr. Unless you're committing assault. Do what the, be an MLK protester. Don't be a Malcolm protester, right? Peacefully protest. Don't shove people's hands in the doors. And if you are arrested for peaceful protest,
so to be clear, hand in door gets you 3.5 years in federal prison. Running over a cop gets you so far nothing.
That's not what I said.
Okay, I understand. Well, I know, and I'm just saying. I understand why people in this country feel like their government is siding with all the wrong people, because it is. In a great many of the cases. So my white pill is going to be that we'll have some law and order around these parts here before too long, and maybe that'll be a good thing. But we are totally out of time. Okay. Apologies for that. So, any last thoughts, or where can people find you? You're on TikTok.
I'm on TikTok. My name's Cody Pogue, CodyPogue. So go follow me.
I'm not telling y'all where I work, right? Yo.
Okay, well, where do you live, though? Okay, all right. Anyway, Ken, you can find Ken. He's at every white Theology by the Pint. Theology by the Pint event, and a lot of our White Pill Radio events as well. Anyway, I'm Evan McClanahan. I'm the pastor at First Lutheran. I don't they're like embarrassed every time I say that, so don't take it out on them. But anyway, thanks for joining us this time. We'll catch you next time. Until then, we encourage you to question freely, think deeply, and disagree as needed.